I'm really blessed today to have Chris Wark with me. Chris beat cancer. Chris has a wonderful testimony, and he's a cancer survivor. In fact, he's a chemo-free cancer survivor. He's a blogger and a cancer speaker and coach. He's an author. His book's coming out soon. And Chris, it's just great to meet you. Will you tell us some of your story, please?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. 2003, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, and I was 26 years old. And it came as a shock, as you know, any cancer diagnosis would to anyone at any age, but 26-year-olds typically don't get cancer, especially not colon cancer. And but I had been having abdominal pain and went to the doctor, and after a series of tests, they did a colonoscopy and they found a tumor in my large intestine. So at that time, I was very, what I would call, typical cancer patient. I was rushed into surgery. They took out the tumor. They said, it's spread. You're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy, and you know, we've got to do this right away. And I didn't have time to think, right? I didn't have time to think about my life. I didn't have time to think about what treatment I wanted or didn't want, what my options were. Didn't have time to learn or research or explore. It was just rush, rush, rush. And so I found myself, you know, in the hospital, having had surgery, facing chemotherapy that would start as soon as I'd recovered from surgery, and just lost. You know, I was lost at that time. And even though I'm a believer and I trusted the Lord, I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand why I was sick. I felt like I didn't deserve to be sick. I thought about all the evil people in the world and how much more they deserved it, right? Like, you know, rapists and murderers and people like that. Why don't they have cancer, right? Why am I the guy with cancer? And so I was dealing with a lot of confusion, right? And some doubt, and some serendipitous things happened to me when I was in the hospital that started things turning around. And one of those was the first meal they served me in the hospital was a sloppy Joe, which is, I don't even know if you know what that is, but it's just an American junk food. You know, it's a ground up burger meat with a really sloppy sauce on a bun, you know, hamburger bun. It's the worst example of just terrible cafeteria kind of food. And it was the first meal in the hospital after they'd cut out a third of my large intestines. And I just remember sitting there looking at it going, I can't believe this is what they're serving sick people, you know, like, or people with cancer. Like, why are they giving them this terrible food? And so that was the first red flag. The second red flag was the day I was leaving, the surgeon came in to check on me, and I asked him if there's any food I needed to avoid, because I didn't want to risk eating something spicy or, you know, maybe some chips or something and messing up my insides that he had just stitched together. And he said, nah, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. That was it. That was the nutritional advice I got from my surgeon. So, you know, it just started the wheels turning. You know, I was thinking, gosh, I mean, nutrition doesn't matter? Doesn't matter what you eat? And at least these doctors don't seem to think so. The hospital doesn't seem to think so. And so I went home, and my wife and I, we prayed. You know, we prayed over my situation. I was confused. I didn't have a good feeling about chemotherapy. The idea of poisoning my way back to health didn't make sense. And I needed some direction. And so my wife and I prayed together, and I just said, Lord, you know, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, just show me, because I don't know what to do. And 2 days later, I received a book that had been mailed to me from a man in Alaska who knew my dad. I've never met the man to this day, but he knew my dad. He heard that I was diagnosed with cancer, and he mailed me a book, and it was a book called God's Way to Ultimate Health. And that book was written by another man who had colon cancer and healed it with nutrition, with a radical change in his diet and lifestyle. He started juicing carrots, 64 ounces of carrot juice a day, and he converted his diet from a standard Western diet, American diet, to a diet that was a raw food diet. Tons of fruits and vegetables, food straight from the earth, right? Organic. And his body healed. And as I read his testimony and I read his story, and it had been something like 20 years since this man had healed, still alive, still in excellent health. And I knew it was an answer to prayer. I just knew it. And so I thought, you know what, if he did it, I can do it. If he did it, maybe it'll work for me. And so I just immediately adopted a raw food diet and started juicing carrots. Bought a juicer, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And I was excited about it, but most of the people around me were not. They thought I was nuts. And I started getting phone calls from people saying, we're worried about you, and we heard that you don't want to do chemo, and alternative therapies don't work, and I know somebody that tried those and they died. And so you really have to do what your doctor says. And that wasn't the support I had expected from the people around me. And that sent a lot more doubt and confusion into my mind. And so I had to really trust the Lord, because I was very alone. I was very, very alone. And, he had given me an option. I'd asked for something. He gave it to me. He gave me an alternate path. But I didn't realize at the time that I would have to go down that path alone. And I was fortunate to have a mom who was very supportive. But at the time, my wife thought I was crazy. Most of the other family members thought I was crazy. And there was a lot of pressure just to do chemotherapy. So I reluctantly agreed to go see the oncologist just to make some people happy. And that's what most cancer patients do. Most cancer patients, they don't want to do chemotherapy. They're just doing it to make everyone else happy. Mm. And so I was in the same position. So I went and saw this oncologist, and when we were in the waiting room, the television was on, and Jack LaLanne comes out on TV. He was a guest on one of the morning shows, and he starts going off about nutrition and natural therapies, and this is why we're all so sick, because we're eating terrible food. We need to start juicing and eating more fruits and vegetables. And it was right on the television when I was in the cancer clinic, and it was he just spoke to me through the TV. I was like, wow, this is exactly what I've been reading. This is what I think is right. And I can't believe this is on at this moment.
That was a God incident, Chris.
Yes. No doubt.
Yeah.
And then we go back to see the oncologist, and he was very rude. He was not kind. He was very robotic, and just said, you had a 60% chance of living 5 years. I asked him if there were any alternative therapies available. He said, no, if you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane. We asked him about the raw food diet. He said, you can't do that. It'll fight the chemo. And then he said, and I'm not telling you this because I need your business. That's what he said. Mm-hmm. Which to me seemed like is exactly why he was telling me that. And I walked into that cancer clinic confident in what I was doing, and I walked out of his office terrified. Mm. And I went to the desk, and I made an appointment to get a port put in to start chemotherapy, just in a few weeks. And my wife and I walked out and sat in her car, and we held hands and we cried and we prayed. And it was one of the lowest points during that process, aside from being diagnosed with cancer. Because I was so afraid. I mean, the cancer clinic is like a fear factory.
Yeah.
And they use fear to motivate you to take action, right? That's what they do. If you don't do this, you're going to die. If you don't do what we say, you're going to die. And that was, I'd say, the most intense point in time during my cancer journey, because I really realized that I had two paths before me. And one path was like, imagine hordes of people going down a beautifully lit, paved road together. And they're all going down, and then they're getting on a train that is well decorated and comfortable, and all their needs are met, and they have all the support that they need, and they're taken care of, and they're all whisked away on this comfy train. Okay? On the other hand is a jungle with no path that I have to hack my way through alone in the dark. But I knew that was the path that God had put before me, right? I knew that was the way I had to go.
I felt exactly the same way. I knew it was God's word. The Genesis start was God's word, creation start. And I just said, I shall not die but live and proclaim what the Lord has done. And I really wanted it to work.
Yeah. Yep. And
what kind of juices did you have? Was this George Malkmus who?
Yes.
Yes.
George Malkmus. So I started with carrot juice, which
Yeah.
is 64 ounces of carrot juice every day, and then found a local naturopath nutritionist who was also a believer, and his name was John Smothers. And he was the first person to tell me, you're doing the right thing. The first person that believed in me besides my mom.
Hallelujah.
And that was
Yeah.
huge for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was huge. And he had me on a variety of nutraceutical supplementation. He ordered some special testing, special blood work, urine, saliva, stool, all kinds of testing, hair analysis, and put together a very complete metabolic picture of what was going on in my body. And he connected me with an integrative oncologist who did vitamin C IVs in Memphis. And it was a wonderful man, the late Dr. Roy Page. And but John was my first ally, and that was a huge help to me.
I read a book by Philip Day, who's a Christian, and he'd written a book called Cancer, Why We're Still Dying to Know the Truth. And in that book, there were two doctors who had had pancreatic cancer and administered their own lateral.
Yeah.
So that gave me huge support, because I thought, if they have done it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
It's important, isn't it?
And sometimes it just takes one story, one testimonial. I mean, I know someone watching this, my story will be the one story that they need just to give them encouragement and hope, right? And motivation to change their life, to take control of their health. And that's why I share my story now, 11 years later, because I know how powerful one story can be.
That's wonderful. And 2003 was the year I was ill as well. I think it's 12 years now.
Same year.
It's 12 years. And I still maintain it. Do you maintain the program still?
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't, you asked me about juices. So the Dr. John Smothers, he modified my juicing. He had me add some beet and some celery and some ginger root to it, and that jazzed it up a little more. And that's what I stuck with. And still, to this day, is one of my favorite juice blends.
And do you have a little cooked food as well?
I do. So we made changes. So, the healing process is a journey. And sometimes the most important thing is to start somewhere.
Yes.
You pick a protocol and you start. And then you modify it over time as you figure things out. And so what we figured out was that I did not do well on a 100% raw diet. I was on it for 90 days. And I'm a thin guy. I have a high metabolism. I just needed more cooked food. So we added more cooked food like sweet potatoes and quinoa and brown rice and lentils, things like that.
Did you use bicarbonate of soda?
No, I never did sodium bicarbonate, no. So we started eating more cooked food. Still lots of raw food, though. It was about 80% raw for a couple of years and 20% cooked.
Did you start to grow your own vegetables?
I do grow some vegetables, yeah. I like to grow, we grow tomatoes and a lot of leafy greens, like kale. We have a tower garden, so we grow kale and Swiss chard, and last year we did arugula and planted some blueberry bushes. Yeah, so some peppers, and yeah, so we like to grow things.
What did you think about exercise? Did you do a lot of exercise?
Very avid exerciser, yeah. Exercise is one of the most powerful things you can do, along with your diet change. Exercise, I mean, it circulates your blood, it moves your lymphatic system, it switches on cancer protective genes and switches off the cancer promoting genes. Exercise is so powerful. It's been tested to be equally as effective as antidepressant drugs. It's powerful.
Yeah.
So every day, I bought a rebounder. I was jumping on the rebounder every day, doing a little running, going to the gym. You know, movement is life.
Yes, absolutely.
And exercise is critical for health, period. Here's the thing, truth is simple. It's simple. What are the foundation pillars of health? Diet and exercise, stress, and environmental pollution. So those four things, any cause of disease is going to fall under those four categories. You know, if you're eating a terrible Western junk food processed food diet, you're setting yourself up for disease. If you're not exercising, if you're sedentary, if you're lazy, you know, you're setting yourself up for disease. If you are living a life that is high stress and you're full of negativity and unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment and envy and jealousy and anger and all those negative, sinful emotions, you're setting yourself up for sickness.
Absolutely.
And environmental pollution, and if you work in a toxic environment, if you live in a toxic home, right, or in a toxic area, you're setting yourself up for disease. So the great thing is, even though it seems like, oh, there's so many things in the world that can cause cancer, it's true, but for a cancer patient, you have to look at your whole life, and you have to start identifying the factors that might be contributing to your disease so you can eliminate them, right? You have to find the causes of disease in your life. And as you start removing the causes one by one, you free up your body to heal. And if you imagine cancer being the result of a repeated injury, right? Repeated toxic injuries in your body, it's almost like kicking a wall, right? If you kick a wall, you're going to hurt your toes, right? But they'll heal. But if you kick a wall every day, your toes will never heal. You know what I mean? And if you poison and pollute your body every day, how can you expect it to get better?
That's absolutely right. What do you think of the damage with cell phones and computers?
I use a cell phone, but I put it on airplane mode a lot when I'm not using it. I use earbuds, or I'll use speakerphone. I don't like to put it up to my head. So I think cell phone radiation is something we really do need to be concerned about. And I'm very conscientious about it. Absolutely.
Do you use a water distiller or other purifier?
I used a distiller for many years until it broke. And then now I use a Berkey. It's called a Berkey countertop water filter.
Oh, that's a make. Is it an American make?
It started in Britain, actually, the British Berkfield water filter.
Really interesting. So, Chris, would you like to look in the camera and give a message to anyone who's fighting a problem as you did?
Yes, absolutely. No matter what your problem is, give your problem to the Lord. Don't be afraid. Don't let anyone rush you into doing something you are not comfortable doing, you're not ready to do, and you don't have a peace about. That's the most important thing. You need to have peace in your heart when you make a decision like this. about what to do next. And if you don't have a peace, then guess what? You don't have to make a decision. Despite what someone may be telling you, your situation may not be as urgent as people lead you to believe. And I believe in most cases with most cancers, you have time. You have time, and you have options. And you need to take time to investigate why you're sick, right? What you can do to change your life. And if you have a responsibility in your condition, if you've contributed to your condition, and I believe that most of us that have diseases have contributed in some way to our conditions, then now is the opportunity to change your life. And if you caused it, guess what? Maybe you can reverse it. And that's a very powerful message. It's not one of blame, it's one of empowerment. Because that's saying, hey, you know what? Maybe this is my fault and it's okay. Because if it's my fault, I can fix some things. And you don't have to be powerless. Because when you surrender all of your faith, hope, and trust to a doctor, even if they're a nice, wonderful person, you lose your power. And your faith, hope, and trust has to be in the Lord first, and then in yourself second, and then third, maybe a practitioner to help you along the way, and in that order. And so I just want to encourage anyone, again, watching this, to think about those things. Think about your life, and don't do anything that you don't have a peace about, and trust the Lord to lead you in the process.
Was there a particular verse in the Bible that stood out for you?
Yep. In the very beginning, when I was diagnosed, the first verse that came to my mind was that God works all things for the good of those who love Him and who are called according to His purpose. And even though I was not happy about a cancer diagnosis, I believed that He would work it for my good, that He would work it somehow. He would work it for my good. And the other verse that I really clung to was that the righteous man suffers many afflictions, but the Lord delivers him from them all. That's in Psalm 34. And that was my banner verse. I mean, that's when we announced that I had been diagnosed with cancer to our local church, I stood up in front of the church, and that was the verse that I quoted over my life.
That's wonderful. Now, you have a book coming out, I think.
Yes.
And when is that going to come out?
So the book will be out sometime this year. We're just finishing up the editing, and so as soon as that's done and I feel like it's ready, then we will release it.
It has a title?
The title will be Chris Beat Cancer.
Oh, that's wonderful. And your website is?
ChrisBeatCancer.com.
Oh, well, Chris, it's been wonderful to be able to share this time with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank
God bless you.
And you.